Godzilla, the movie monster, first appeared on film in 1954 and has been terrorizing movie screens ever since. If you've been living under a rock for the last 60 years, Godzilla is a giant prehistoric sea monster that causes mayhem and chaos everywhere he goes, even when he's just trying to help. Let's see how the Godzilla story translated over to the video game world on this edition of Friday Night Arcade. Well, when it comes to Godzilla games, you can't go back much further than this. Godzilla first appeared in 1983 for the Commodore 64, developed by Glenn Fisher and published by Codeworks. It's a real-time strategy battle simulator where Godzilla will randomly appear somewhere on the map and start making his way toward Japan. You can strategize your attacks via land, sea, or air, although once he gets to shore, there's not much you can do except throw everything you've got at him and hope for the best. You can decide how many troops you want to send at him, but usually 75% end up dying in the process, and Godzilla just swats you away like flies. Occasionally, he'll go on a rampage, killing hundreds of thousands or even millions. It's possible to eventually beat him if you just keep using your resources, but odds are most of Japan will be dead in the process. You also have the option to nuke Godzilla, but if you do, 65 million people die, Tokyo is destroyed, and Godzilla will be declared the winner anyway. The moral of the story here is that nuclear weapons are bad, which was kind of the point of the original movies. Next up, Godzilla and the Martians. Developed by Neil Streeter and released by Temptation Software in 1983 for the ZX Spectrum. The Martians have invaded. The girl of your dreams is stuck at the top of a building site. Protecting her from the evil invaders is a friendly monster. Now it's up to you to get up there and rescue her. Watch out for the pits, which you will have to jump over. So, I guess it's a half-assed Donkey Kong clone with Space Invaders sprites instead of barrels, and the monster is protecting the girl at the top instead of holding her hostage? Well, that's something. Let's try to get over. Oh no, make it stop, Godzilla versus three major monsters. I'm not making that up, that's actually the name. Developed and published in 1984 by Bandai for the MSX. Hey, now this is more like it. You actually get to control Godzilla, move around in 3 dimensions, and you can even shoot Godzilla's atomic breath. The game is pretty short. You basically just have to defeat 3 monsters. First up is Megalon, who tunnels up through the ground. Interestingly, once one of these tunnels is made, it stays on the screen and Godzilla can actually fall into it. Then you fight several Kumongas, and after that you fight King Ghidorah while protecting Manila. That's the son of Godzilla. I love the arcade sound effects, background details, and the sprites here. There's not much to it, but it's definitely a step in the right direction for early Godzilla games. Next up, Fierce Dragon Godzilla Metropolis Destruction. Developed and published again by Bandai, this was released in 1985 for the PC X1 and the FM7. Unfortunately, I have no way of playing this game, which is a shame because I like the way the graphics look. The player would take control of Godzilla, going through towns and forests, raising heck and running up a high score. You could step on tanks and shoot the atomic breath at soldiers too. Dang, this actually looks really cool. If anyone has actually played this one, I'd love to hear your experience with it. Well, we've got a couple more here for the MSX, both by Toho. Gojira-Kun, released in 1985. What the heck is this? It's fashioned as a kind of weird puzzle game. You're Godzilla, I guess. Each of these other monsters running around is technically a monster from the Godzilla franchise, if you can believe that. Godzilla can punch, push rocks, and climb up and down these vines. So the goal in each level is to destroy all of the rocks. Destroy them all and a power-up appears that transports you to the next level. Okay. Monsters Fair, released for the MSX in 1986. This time you get to play as Mothra, or at least a Mothra larva? Huh? A UFO kidnaps these girls and now you take control of Mothra to rescue them from the space monsters including Godzilla. Yeah, you actually fight against Godzilla this time. Looks just like him, right? Mothra can move around in all 4 directions, but the screen doesn't let you go down once you start to head upwards. I guess the goal is to get the high score, but you can just race through the levels and technically not shoot any monsters at all. The Movie Monster game, released for the Apple II and Commodore by Epix in 1986. This is my favorite of the bunch. Instead of a storyline, they opted for more of a caveman Olympics style game. You can play as Godzilla or a couple of other random knockoff movie monsters. A giant wasp called Spectra, the Glog, a giant tarantula called Tarantus, a giant robot called Mechatron, and the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man's half-cousin, Mr. Meringue. Oh, this is epic. You can choose the location as well as the type of scenario you want to play out. For example, in Berserk mode, the goal is to destroy as many vehicles and buildings as you can. In Escape, you have to get out of the city before the military destroys you. There's an option to destroy a landmark, and there's also lunch mode. You just go around eating as many people as you can, and you even have a hunger meter. And all of this takes place on a movie screen with an audience watching, the very essence of the Godzilla and monster movie genre. There's even little ads that run before each scenario, like this commercial for gummy glogs. And they took the time to make up little specific backstories for each character, and they're even scenario specific. He strode out of nowhere, a towering morass of sticky meringue. Some say he was cooked up in a bakery near Chernobyl. Others claim he was the second prize entry of one Mrs. Johansson in a bake-a-thon in Moorhead, Minnesota. Whatever the case, they call him Mr. Meringue. And now he's headed into New York, stuck on the idea of destroying the landmark. The actual game is isometric action where you move around in all directions and just smash stuff and eat people. The sound effects are fun and it's cool just going around stomping stuff to bits. This is what a Godzilla monster game should be. It's great. No reason to get too complicated about it. You get a hilarious little epilogue too. In one situation, I played the lunch scenario with Godzilla, and although I managed to eat enough people to run down the hunger meter, I didn't make it out of the city in time before the military killed me. There's a thunderous boom as tons of dinosaur meat crashes onto the street. At least he had one last good meal. Rounding out Godzilla games on the 80s, it's Godzilla, Monster of Monsters, developed by Compile and released by Toho for the Nintendo Entertainment System in 1989. I like the story here. Somewhere in the future 2000s AD, Pluto and Neptune exchange positions in the solar system. Then Earth receives a declaration of war from an unknown planet that mysteriously appears. The invaders from Planet X attack Earth as part of their plan to conquer the universe using a fleet of space monsters. So the people of Earth do the only reasonable thing by sending Godzilla and Mothra into space to defend us. That's just awesome. So you navigate Mothra and Godzilla through space on these boards that look like some kind of intergalactic chess. Each space on the board is called a ring field, and you have to make your way through them all to defeat the invaders from Planet X. Along the way, you'll battle across space stations and planets every time you enter a ring field. The goal of each of these boards is to make it all the way through and take over the enemy's base on the other side. Then you get to move to the next board, which represents another area in the solar system, eventually making your way to Planet X. But the enemy has their own pieces to move across the board in the form of space monsters. If Godzilla or Mothra runs into one of these monsters, then you have to battle them. These are all monsters from random Godzilla movies or other miscellaneous monster movies, Gigan, Hedorah, and Mechagodzilla, among others. Some of the monsters weren't even from Godzilla movies at all, which is a little weird. I would have liked to have seen a deeper roster of Godzilla villains to fight along the way, but to be honest, that's just the tip of the iceberg. This game has some serious problems. First of all, these monster battles are kinda lame. Despite the fact that you're in space and going across all these planets, the actual monster battles just take place in a vacuum of total darkness. There's no background at all. It's just two monsters battling in nothing. And there's also a time limit. If you take too long to defeat a monster, it just sends you back across the ring field board and the monster regains some of its life. Then if you manage to defeat one of the monsters, it doesn't matter because it just respawns in the next level, along with a new monster. By the time you get to the end, all of the monsters are sitting there waiting for you, and if you can somehow get through all of them, then you get to fight King Ghidorah. Unfortunately, getting that far will test the sanity of even the most skilled and patient players. Each one of these ring fields along the way is its own level, and they're an exercise in frustration. You can play as either Mothra or Godzilla, and neither one really gives you much of an advantage. Godzilla trudges across the screen all ploddingly, getting blitzed in the face by hordes of enemies, and it seems like he's constantly getting pushed back. These things are relentless, not to mention running into random obstacles like, rocks and stuff. He can punch, kick, and swing his tail along with firing his atomic breath, but it doesn't seem like any of it helps much. The game is pretty liberal with power-ups to refill your life bar, but for some reason they're always getting pushed towards the right of the screen, while you keep getting pushed backwards to the left. It's just a tease. Get over here. Come on! If you play as Mothra, you can fly over some of the obstacles, but her projectiles don't do much damage, and whenever she gets hit, she gets flung backwards halfway across the screen. I'll keep the rant short and just say that they had some good ideas here. I like the idea of having to fight through several monsters, and some of the background graphics and music aren't bad, but ultimately I don't think I can recommend this version unless you're just really hard up for some Godzilla. I don't know. Am I being too hard on this one? What do you think? What's your favorite Godzilla game of all time, 80s era or otherwise? Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time on Friday Night Arcade.